I would call to order the Village of Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for October 14th. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Commissioner Pill?
Here.
Commissioner Anton?
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here. Commissioner Fleet?
Here.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Here.
And Chairman Richard?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please, if you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While I have you all standing, please, you all have to be sworn in if you're going to give any testimony tonight, either for or against any item. So if you'll raise your right hand, I swear that any testimony I give this evening shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I so swear.
Okay. I would ask that you silence any and all pagers and electronic equipment, if you would, please. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our September 9th meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pill, seconded by Commissioner Fleet. Question on the motion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pill?
Yes.
Commissioner Anton?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren passes. Commissioner Fleet?
Yes.
Commissioner Richard?
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Pass.
And Commissioner Thomas?
Pass.
Okay, the minutes as presented are hereby adopted. Next item on the agenda under old business is, if I may ask, is anybody here regarding the Westmont zoning code text amendment in the audience? If not,
Commissioner, I'd like to make a motion to move item PZ 06-038 to last on the agenda.
Second.
okay, that's motion by Commissioner Pill, seconded by Commissioner Anton. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Anton?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Fleet?
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Pill?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. All right, the zoning code text amendment will be last on the agenda. Next item on our agenda, under planning and zoning, item 09010, John Abunijme of House of Engineering regarding the property located at 234 West Burlington for the following. A, revised site and landscaping plan approval. Good evening, sir. I hope I did justice to your name.
You did very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Here I'm back again here to seek your approval for the revised site plan and landscaping plan. Since last meeting, we have developed a new architectural plan, which shows the front elevation and the floor plan of the 2 units. This is the landscaping plan. This is the site plan depicting the detention area behind the building.
If you could, please, sir, would you tell us what the concerns were from the trustees and how you've addressed them? It's paperwork.
The concern were in relation to the lot coverage and to the detention stormwater management. And I have reduced the lot coverage to 40%. In the previous submittal was 46% because we had a detached rear garage. I eliminated that to be able to provide the detention area. And also we changed the design of the building to be able to get the 40%. And I provided the full detention for stormwater management.
Okay. Is that pretty much
Sum it up. Yes.
all right? Is there anybody from the audience who wishes to speak on this item? If not, we'll close the public comment. Could we start with staff, please, if you have any concerns?
I'll just kind of summarize a little bit about what the petitioner has said. He's done a good job of explaining the concerns of the village board. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved this project, I believe it was June 10th, and it went before the board July 16th. And at that time, the concerns were because of the flooding and stormwater issues throughout the village, there was a concern for the amount of impermeable surface coverage on this property. The village is going through a stormwater study at this time, and some early results will be available in December for that. And based on the applicant's timing, we tried to work together to possibly eliminate some of that coverage. So he ended up eliminating the detached garage, which he referred to a moment ago. He also changed the pavement and reduced the amount of driveway pavement. This plan represents the third version, I believe. So at this point, the in-ground detention has been added to try to mitigate some of the concerns regarding the flooding or stormwater issues. He also provided some supplemental information on his experience with other projects throughout the area, which has been included in your packet. And I think that's about it. I did want to make one point of clarification. In the staff packet, it does say that the village board denied the project. They actually postponed it for more information. So I do want to clarify that.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, might just add one other thing, if I could paraphrase some of the comments that were made by the village trustees at their consideration of this matter. As we're all aware, there is a great concern with the amount of surface water runoff that we have in the village, and indeed, as a result of some of these public hearings that we've had over the past several months, we've learned that we've had probably 4 or 5 major flooding incidents in the village, in various portions of the village. The concern with this particular location is that an area immediately to the west, I believe, just a couple, 3 blocks away, has experienced some of those severe flooding situations, and the village board wanted to make absolutely sure that we wouldn't add to the severity or the frequency of those types of events in the future.
Okay. Do you feel fairly, does staff feel fairly
Some
comfortable with
preliminary.
the stormwater retention as it's presented to us?
Some preliminary review comments. A secondary review was done by planning engineer Kim Nickel, and those review comments have been presented this evening. There were just some general comments, so a lot of these details will obviously be worked out in final engineering if the project is approved, but generally the petitioner is planning to meet and answer to those concerns.
Okay. We'll start with the commissioners then. Commissioner Thomas, if you would.
Was there, I read somewhere about the board being concerned about density. Is that still a concern, or?
I think as it relates to the stormwater issue, Commissioner, that appeared to be the main concern, if we can, you know.
Not so much as the architecture.
Yeah, I think density only was an issue as it relates to, you know, too many units contributing to adverse stormwater incidents. They just wanted to be very careful about that.
And that was before the water retention was added also.
Yes.
No, I have no questions.
Commissioner Pill.
Thank you. My first question would be for staff, either Fred or Shannon. Would this project be one that would require us to get a signed lot conversion document on file so that we don't have exceed the 40%?
When the permit would be submitted, I believe that would now be part of the general course of action that.
Well, I think we're dealing with a different zoning
that's true.
classification here, Commissioner. The 40% current lot zoning requirements and the new form that we're talking about is for R1, R2, and R3 single-family districts, where we've experienced the vast majority of individual teardowns and reconstructions. We haven't done that in R4 and R5, where traditionally a little bit of an increased density has been considered a desirable thing, kind of in sync with the principles of transit-oriented design development strategy. But given the fact that we have had a number of severe stormwater flooding incidents in the past year and a half, the board is very sensitive to these types of issues. But ordinarily, we would not have a 40% lot coverage even in an R4 or an R5 as we would in the single-family detached dwelling districts.
Thank you. I have no questions.
Commissioner Anton?
I really don't have any questions. I think he's been put through enough, and he's come to the trustees when they've asked him to do a lot of stuff, and he's done it. My concern is that is every house or double lot going to have a pond in the backyard? Is that what's going to happen?
Well, good question, Commissioner. In this case, when you do a lot consolidation like this, it does fall under our subdivision code requirements as per village code.
So for village code, then, if it's a regular single lot, you don't have to worry about that.
That is correct. Currently, if you're just redeveloping,
Building a new
tearing
house.
down a single-family home and rebuilding a new single-family home, no, under our current requirements, you do not have to put in stormwater detention. But under the subdivision code, and generally we think of, okay, you take a big piece of property and split it up into smaller ones, but because of the way the code is written, even if you take multiple lots and can consolidate them into one for purposes of doing a multifamily construction project, it does fall under the provisions of the subdivision code with regard to stormwater detention. We think that's a good thing to continue into the future.
Right, and then some of the work on Maple Avenue take away some of that stormwater. There was big storm drains put in on Maple when they redid that, right? As it went down the way down there, doesn't that connect to some of that? You're saying the area to the west, it gets a lot of water.
Well, we're talking about west on Burlington and maybe in that first block north.
Yeah.
So just almost immediately to the west of where this development is, there's a very low spot there where the storm sewers don't appear to be large enough to have the capacity to take a rather large rainfall away. So that's why the village board is very concerned about, are we going to be doing something here by covering up more of the ground than was covered up when there were two small single-family homes on there? Are we going to be creating
Sure,
more of an issue or contributing further to the
I
problem?
get it. How about long-term? How are we going to solve the problem? Every time I go down that area, I don't like to go down the area because obviously they've got an issue with flooding. They ask, what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? That kind of thing. I don't know. I don't have any answers for that.
Well, and that's why the village board has spent approximately $250,000 with the engineering firm of Christopher Burke to make a comprehensive stormwater analysis and study of the entire community. Those preliminary results, we believe, will be available to us perhaps the second week in December, so we're just a few short weeks away from that. And the board is wanting to be very cautious until we see what some of those recommendations are originating out of that study.
Gotcha. Because my concern is you go up on 31st Street there and you go across into Oak Brook, you got some of these houses, they're nice houses, and they got a moat in the front of the house. That looks awful. So I'd rather not see everybody have ponds and moats. And
Classic example is that house up on 31st Street between, I think it's
you've seen
Midwest
it.
Road and Highland Avenue, and it's just, their whole front yard is just a big cavern.
Exactly.
You know.
I'm rambling. Good luck with that.
Commissioner Van Buren?
I don't know if this is a departure because of the concerns and the recent study on stormwater, but in the past, we've had cash in lieu of so that we could approach this in more of a holistic manner. Now we're pinpointing. Am I right in that assumption or not?
Well, I think, yes, you're correct, Commissioner. We're pinpointing, and we're also awaiting the results of that comprehensive stormwater analysis. We think there are going to be some very strong recommendations from the engineering firm as to what should be done in various parts of the village, how should we prioritize some remedies or fixes that they might recommend. A lot of it's going to depend on available funds for the village. We're not in the most favorable cash position, so it may be a combination of what can we get for the most bang for our buck in terms of some projects that we can do in various portions of the village to alleviate flooding that's the most acute in certain areas.
I think the cash in lieu of would not be recommended if it was in a known flooding problem. They would force the developer to put in the detention.
So it's not necessarily a change. That would have been the case all along, right? That's all.
Commissioner Fidesco?
I just want to compliment the petitioner on his changes, and it's not going to be a pond as far as I can see. It's actually dry
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah, but it is a depressed area. In fact, you don't have to go up to 31st Street. Go down Wilmette, right by my house, and you'll see a house or two houses side by side with moats.
Or the medical
Both
center.
are for sale, and nobody's bought them because of that. You know, it's just like,
Well, that's an excellent discussion. I think Commissioner Anton and Commissioner Fidesco raise an interesting point. You know, we've kind of raised a negative example that we see up in, you know, a neighboring community. On a positive note, you can see an example of what you can do and make a dry bottom detention basin a very attractive feature down at 67th and Cass, where developer Tim Ryan has taken two 16-unit buildings, and the depressional area in front of there has been nicely landscaped, and you know, 90% of the year it's available. Kids can go out there and play Frisbee. I don't think they got too many kids in that subdivision there, but it's an attractively done dry bottom detention basin. So you can do it in such a way that it adds to the aesthetics of the area rather than detracts from.
yeah. And I don't have any other questions. I think it's a good project, and it'll go well with the redevelopment plans of that neighborhood.
Commissioner Fleet?
Could the study that will be finalized in December either positively or negatively affect the design that we're seeing today?
Well, yes.
And would we make adjustments to it based on the results of the study?
That's a possibility. I'd say that's a strong possibility. If, for example, the engineering firm comes back and says we need to oversize the stormwater system a couple of blocks or 3 blocks to the west of 234 West Burlington, then the village board is going to have to make a very important decision. Given the cost of enlarging that storm sewer system over there, you know, should we place what limited dollars we have in that area, or should we place them in someplace else that may have an equal to or greater problem where the fix might be less expensive? So, you know, that's why I think they're wanting to be very cautious about this one, is we don't know yet what those recommendations are going to be, nor do we know the cost of any potential fixes at this early stage in the study.
But the study won't affect this development. This development is going to get processed, go up to the village board. If it's approved, the petitioner can move forward irregardless of what the study says. The board can't go back and make him change his design further once he gets approval, assuming he does get approval.
Okay. No further questions.
Okay. Shannon, I noticed there are two decks shown on this. Are they figured in with the lot coverage
Yes.
then? Okay. And since we do have this flooding problem, any thought given to perhaps pervious concrete for the driveways?
Shannon?
Well, I think we're still at a position where, because we're a partial waiver community, we're not entitled to give credit for the alternative materials. It doesn't count the void space for impermeable or permeable pavers doesn't count, and we aren't able to count pervious pavement at this point and give a credit for it. We would encourage it wherever possible, and we'd actually like to start seeing some examples or, you know, test pilot projects where it's used. However, unfortunately, we can't give a bonus, basically.
Sir,
based
are
on
you
the
aware of
materials.
this product that is?
I'm familiar with it, and but I think last meeting you have asked for it, and Mr. Fred said that the county, DuPage County, has no specification so.
I realize,
But I'm
but
familiar with it. I
if
have
it
seen
is
it in
not-
shopping. It's mostly used for a big site, for big shopping centers, or not on a smaller site. This is a 60-foot wide lot.
I would ask if you can find it reasonable and not cost prohibitive, perhaps you could think about it.
I
but-
went to a seminar just a week ago concerning this type of material, and it's very expensive.
It is, oh.
It's not
okay.
cost effective for a small project.
I understand.
But I like to say something in regard to the detention area. This is a very small site in DuPage County. It's not qualified. A site like that is not qualified for a detention area. It seems I've been caught on a technicality that I'm consolidating 2 lots. If it was one lot, a 60-foot lot, then I wouldn't be qualified under that ordinance or under that jurisdiction. So I'm willing to go with it because I want to move the project forward, but I'm not really convinced that I'm going to be able to solve the problem of flooding. I did the analysis between existing condition and proposed condition. It's only 300 cubic feet of water, the change. So it's insignificant to the development. So I would ask and appeal to you that really to reconsider, or the village to reconsider their request that to put a detention area, because by doing it, we're losing the backyard for the kids to play. I mean, I know there is a depression, but so it's I don't see the wisdom behind it.
Is that, won't it be dry detention most of the time?
Excuse me?
Will it not be dry detention
It
most
would.
of the
It
time?
would be. It would.
So it does afford,
But it's a 3 foot deep. The 3 foot deep.
but it's a slope.
It is. I'm following the codes for the village 3-to-1 slope. But it's so close. If you could see it, it's too close to the building.
I might suggest to you, sir, that don't sell the children short. I'm pretty sure that when I grew up, we found very creative ways to enjoy our environment, no matter what it was, and I think perhaps you might find that your future tenants' children might find it challenging, inviting, and fun to play in. I'm sorry, John?
A single lot development with no subdivision that comes in just for site plan review, it's always subject to final engineering review. And if there is an issue with stormwater runoff because of density or whatever, that still can be required, to my understanding. It's oftentimes not. Oftentimes there's the cash in lieu of, but again, it's on a case-by-case basis based on engineering concerns, and there's language in our code to protect the village against that. So you're right in a sense. It's not typically required, certainly under the county ordinances, but under the village ordinances.
I visited every single duplex in Westmont. They had no restriction on lot coverage or on detention area. And to single me out, I feel it's unfair. I mean, I'll do it because I want to move the project forward. But it seems it's not right. I mean, I understand what the ordinance or the code says, on a case by case. But I mean, so many cases in Westmont.
But the way I understand it, sir, the other duplexes were built on a single existing lot.
Right.
Where you
I mean,
are-
it's unfortunately I'm caught on a technicality.
Yes, correct.
Well,
Right.
Mr. Chairman, this is not a technicality here. When we say on a case-by-case basis, these other duplexes were built at a time before we had serious flooding incidents with the frequency and severity that we've experienced in the last 18 months. We can point to 5 serious flooding incidents in the village of Westmont within that 18-month period of time. So the case-by-case basis changes over time as the topographic and the stormwater issues change in the village. They certainly have changed for the worse in the very recent past.
Yeah, but-
So we're not singling out this petitioner and saying, others got to do it 10 years ago, you can't do it today. Conditions have changed, and that's part of that case-by-case analysis, a very important part.
And I also think, although you may be kind of the first after the flooding incidents, you won't be the last to be forced to comply with the detention area unless there's a community-wide detention basin or stormwater improvements made to cure the problem. I think everyone could probably sympathize with your feeling that, yes, you're being singled out.
I might offer this information as solace to you, if nothing else. This property is in the jurisdiction of the Downers Grove Sanitary District.
Yes.
One of the problems in the sanitary district is a large amount of what's called I&I, infiltration and inflow. In other words, surface water leaking into the sewer system. The sanitary district is in a very proactive mood right now to make all of their sewers watertight, meaning that all of this surface water will no longer have the sanitary district pipes to drain away in, meaning that it's only going to exacerbate this flooding problem. So this is something that the village is going to have to consider and take a very hard look at. I honestly feel you are just but the first of many to be faced with this problem.
you in a way are a victim of the times, because this is an extremely volatile issue in our community now, and it's not without reason. It didn't happen last year or 10 years ago because the problem wasn't as urgent as it is now. So I agree that to a certain extent you are being somewhat singled out, but it's the timing, and also the issue is a very, very, very volatile issue right now.
Because prior to purchasing the property, I did visit with the staff, and I did ask him about the property. It was never brought to my attention, and that's why I wouldn't have bought it if I knew I had to do a detention, because I have done development in Naperville and in some other communities. When it's a smaller site, it does not qualify. I understand there's a flooding problem, and flooding did not start this year. Flooding, always there will be rain, so we cannot do much about it. I mean, but we cannot control environment, you know. So, but anyway, as I said, I'm willing to do it and invest the money, because it's going to be a substantial cost to me, because I want to have the project move forward. You know, because to leave the property as such, the way it is, it does not benefit me or benefit the village.
Okay, I feel we've fairly well covered this issue. No further comments. Under Planning and Zoning Item 09010, House of Engineering regarding the property located at 234 West Burlington, I would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Trustees, Item A, revised site and landscaping plan approval.
So moved.
Second. I heard motion by Commissioner Pill, seconded by Commissioner Anton. Am I correct? Okay. Question on the motion? May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Fleet?
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Pill?
Yes.
Commissioner Anton?
Yes.
And Chairman Richard?
Yes. All right, sir, you have our recommendation for approval, and staff can tell you when you'll go before the committee of the whole on a Thursday evening.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next item, new business, Planning and Zoning Item 09023, Jeff M. Carnicom of Guava LLC with Inland Commercial Property Management regarding the property located at 800 East Ogden for the following. Item A, zoning code variance request to increase the number of allowable signs from 2 to 3 plus awning lettering. Item B, zoning code variance request to increase the maximum gross square footage of signage to approximately 233 square feet. Code permits 115.2 square feet. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Carnicom, and with me I have Dan Wisner, who's the general manager of Guava and also was the general manager for Cucina Roma that was there for 15 years to hopefully help bridge some of the gaps. And with me here is Paul Rizanowski from Comet Neon, just in case I need any support during these discussions to describe what we are attempting to demonstrate here regarding our signage.
Okay, as you're aware, sir, if I may interrupt just for 1 second, since we are talking about variance requests, we need to hear your particular hardship as to how it applies, if you
Okay.
would.
Sure. I'm going to read the letter, which I think you may have a copy of. Dear Commissioners, enclosed is a complete application for a B2 signage variation. Enclosed are renderings of the total sign package for our building, including electric signs, awnings, and awning graphics. We are submitting these drawings in hopes of obtaining your approval. We truly believe the signage variations that we are requesting are necessary for the following reasons. The current signage code states that our restaurant is in a B2 district on a corner lot. We are allowed 2 signs on our building. We are asking for a variance on the number of signs we are allowed. We are requesting additional signs for these specific reasons. We have installed the 2 permitted signs on the east and west elevations of the building. These 2 signs are separately aimed at motorists driving both east and westbound on Ogden Avenue. Due to the close proximity of the south side of our building to Ogden Avenue, a sign there would not be effective. One of the additional signs is a backlit awning which identifies the entrance of our G-Latin Cafe. Our cafe will offer morning coffee and pastries to the surrounding neighborhoods and office workers along Pasquinelli Drive and Ogden Avenue corridors. It will also serve as the lunch and dinner takeout counter for Guava. The cafe is an integrated part of Guava Restaurant, but requires its own exterior identification and separate entrance. Placing this awning over the cafe entrance will make this an easily identifiable revenue center for our business. The second additional sign we are requesting will go over our main entrance. We have made interior changes to the facility which change the main entrance of the restaurant. Our new entrance is very natural for the architecture of the building. It is located on the northeast corner, which has an elevated facade. This corner of the building, however, is only seen from the parking lot. The entrance of St. James Crossing Shopping Center is on Pasquinelli Drive. As customers enter the parking lot, they cannot see the two existing Guava signs. They, however, would be able to see the sign on this corner of the building. This sign not only identifies Guava, but nicely establishes this corner as our main entrance. We are also asking to apply simple descriptor words to the aprons of the bubble awnings that are on all four corners of the building. These words will help describe what type of restaurant Guava is. Guava is a very unique concept, not only in Westmont, but in this region. Because of that, a major part of our advertising effort is explaining what our concept, a modern Latin restaurant, is. As you can see from the renderings we have submitted, our total sign package is very tasteful yet effective. The second signage variation request we are making is for area, or the allowed square footage of signage based upon the lineal feet of our facade. According to the current sign code, we are allowed 2 times the lineal feet in allowed square footage of signage. The lineal feet is dictated by the addressed facade of the corner of the lot building. Our address is 800 East Ogden Avenue. In this case, we are referring to the south elevation of our building. This is truly the side of our building, and furthermore, the short side. In reality, the true facade of our building is the east elevation. This is where the main entrance of our business is, as well as all of the other previous tenants who have occupied this same space. We are requesting that we be allowed to use the east elevation to calculate the allowed amount of signage. By allowing us that liberty, our total sign package is within a couple of square feet. Our east facade is 115 foot long, and that calculates to 230 square feet of allowed signage. Taking our entire sign package into consideration, we are only asking for 232.75 square feet. We understand the current signage code and are only requesting the following variations in an effort to effectively and tastefully identify our business in the building and area it is located in. We are located at a high-profile intersection, but there are factors which warrant our request. The entrance to the shopping center is not on Ogden Avenue. People must follow signage around our building and the center to get to their destination. Our building is also set below the street levels of both Ogden Avenue and Pasquinelli Drive. The signage we are proposing works with the facade and is also eye level for passing motorists. It should be noted that the sign variation requests are more than is currently allowed by code, but less than the business that formerly occupied the 8,000 square foot space we are in. When designed the total sign package for the building, we aimed for an upscale look while keeping the architecture of the building in mind. We believe our proposed package represents both Guava and the Village of Westmont in a very positive way. So that, in a roundabout way, kind of tells you where we're at with the building, the signage, et cetera. When I purchased the business from Cucina Roma, there were many more awnings, a lot more verbiage, and a lot more overall signage. In an effort to create a different look of the space, I chose to remove those awnings, remove that signage, to begin to create a different restaurant, if you will, to come up with something that was a very noticeable change. Having done that, we then went to work on redesigning signs, color schemes, and the overall advertising profile of the building. As I stated in the letter, Guava is a unique concept, one that my partner, the chef, and I created a long time ago, in essence, and became reality over the course of the last 6 months. We've certainly enjoyed great support from the village and from the residents as well as the business community around there. And I think what we're delivering is a high-profile destination restaurant that people are coming here to visit. And not to dwell on the tough economic times, but any advantage that we can give ourselves to draw in more customers, to make ourselves more visible, and easily identify not only what we are, but what is represented inside of the four walls would be to all of our advantage. So what we have put together is a combination of what was there, what's there now, and what we hope to be able to put in addition to what is there.
All right, very well. Is there anybody from the public who will speak on this? I don't see anybody. We'll close the public comment. Does staff have any comments?
I'll just make a couple of points. The building, the front building side, the facade along the street addressing side, the Ogden Avenue frontage is where we take the amount of square footage allowed for signage, and that's per the zoning ordinance, and in this case it was 2 times that facade length. This wasn't processed as a request to vary that or as a text amendment. Instead, it was processed as a total area variance. There are some unique siting issues, as I think the petitioner has done a good job of explaining. There is a grade change from Ogden Avenue, and it's sort of tucked into the southwest nook of the property. So the siting's a little difficult, and also this was also originally intended as a multi-tenant building where each tenant space had its own opportunity for signage. So with the front entrance now being oriented towards the interior of the parking lot, if the sign program is approved, there are some unique characteristics.
Okay, very fine. We'll start with Commissioner Fleet, if you would, please.
You mentioned some lighting on the signs. What will be lit?
The signs are internally illuminated.
So the canopies?
One of the canopies, which is the one that would be over top of, it is not there today. This would be over the cafe entrance.
Oh, the cafe is, okay.
Right. That would be backlit signage, basically where those white letters are. It would illuminate.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a heat-sealed plastic that bonds to this sunbrella fabric that allows light to pass through. Well, this material would not allow light to show through.
Okay. I've been in that parking lot quite a bit, and certainly it's, when you're trying to, first of all, just maneuver among the cars and everything, it's hard to try to pick out things. And since, as you've said, that it's now one business with a couple different themes in places, I think your signage would help somebody trying to find Guam. If they went to it on the internet, certainly it's going to give the Ogden Avenue address, which presents another challenge to figure out that, okay, it's not actually, it's along Ogden, but that whole thing. And I think this would give you some good recognition, easier for people who are driving in a very busy parking lot and a very busy street and corner.
Thank you, Commissioner. To further make that point, when we made the structural changes inside from how the restaurant is positioned and where the entrance is, it was a departure from where the entrance was for Cucina Roma. So there isn't, and I mean this literally, there isn't a day goes by that I don't have patrons go to the wrong entrance trying to get into the restaurant. And you'll notice that there's signs now that kind of hang with arrows pointing, go the other way. Part of what we're trying to do is to, make that at the focal point so people can easily identify this is where I should go in to the restaurant.
I've experienced that same thing myself, trying to get in there. Okay, no more.
Commissioner Fidesco?
I just wanted to ask the staff, the other part of the mall, now, do they have an address on Pasquinelli?
I think they have both. The south-facing facade, I believe, is addressed to Ogden, and the west-facing facade, I believe, is addressed
That's
to-
kind of odd, because, I mean, that would be further from Ogden than,
Right.
you know, it's kind of a strange situation. The mall itself is very strange. Had this been used, this particular building been used by multiple occupants, I mean, we would have been in a little bit of a situation. How do we figure out signage? Because then it would have been, you know, the business had a face to the parking lot. And we would have done it on that amount of space that they're covering in their lease, you know, from, you know, their frontage. In this situation, what's the difference? You know, their actual front of the building is in fact facing the parking lot. So I agree with the petitioner that it really is the proper way to do it. I mean, it's just, if you want to call it a technicality, that they happen to have an address on Ogden Avenue and it's in a pit. You know, if you go by there, you can only see about half the wall on Ogden Avenue because it's down in the hole. You know, so I don't think that these are overbearing. I think that they're actually better than the ones that were there before. And I used to eat at the other restaurant on a somewhat regular basis, and honestly, it looks better. And I think that it's going to work out if we approve it.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Commissioner Van Buren?
I think Commissioner Fidesco expressed my sentiments very well. I have no more to say.
Commissioner Anton?
Nice job, it looks good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Pill?
I agree with all of your points, and I thought your letter was well-written. I've recently experienced Guava. I've actually been there a couple of times, and I want to tell you, I think you've done a great job on the inside and the outside. I think it's a classy addition. I think it's good for the village, and I think you've done a good job of reinventing a concept that perhaps had run its course, and now you've brought something new and fresh, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new place open. Just a technical question. I'm not much of a sign guy, but in looking at that sign, now, if the brown does not allow light to go through it and the white does, that means you're not just putting white lettering on the brown. Are you actually cutting out then?
Absolutely. It
Bar.
is a translucent plastic material that is heat sealed around each edge of every letter. And the fluorescent lights that are within the awning shine through that. So at nighttime, all you see are the letters.
So you cut the L in Latin out of the brown,
Absolutely.
Yes.
and then you sew in the other one.
Correct.
No, you sewed it.
I was just curious. Okay. Well, good luck. I really think you guys have done a great job. A very nice presentation too.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I agree with the hardship, and it all makes sense, and you are at a disadvantage, and I support your request. That's all I have.
I would also agree with my fellow commissioners on pretty much everything they say. I did have one question. On your different elevations, you're showing where you're recovering the frame of the awning and you're going to put new fabric up. Will that also have the lettering on each of the signs?
That is part of the request. Right now, what is up is just what you see here, and that's the bubbles green with the brown apron along the bottom. The technology allowed us to go ahead, put these awnings up so we could draw attention to the color, which was already approved and in the works. What part of our request is the ability to actually add some white descriptor lettering. They won't be backlit, but during the day, very easily readable to say things like,
Like mojito, banquets, salsa.
right, what's going on here and kind of what's it about. So
can we assume then that every awning will have bottom lettering as to its bottom brown panel?
yes, very similar to that one where you see coffee, pastries, takeout. It would say something like that.
Yes, okay. Has this all been considered in the 233-foot, Shannon?
Yes,
Okay.
just as a point of clarification, there are a total of 9 bubble awnings, and they're asking to put 2 words per awning at an average of 2 square feet in total area on each awning. And then the cafe opening, or the cafe area, is going to be having 3 words and the lettering on the brown, and that's also been included.
Just so everything's been already accounted for and
Yes.
taken into consideration. Did you have any? No. Okay, that's all I have. Since we do have variance requests, we need readings of findings of fact, if we may have that, please.
John, did you have findings of fact?
Seeing the cold, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Shannon to verbalize.
Thank you. Criteria number 1, the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in the district in which it is located. The property is uniquely situated on the corner of Pasquinelli and Ogden, requiring additional signs for each street frontage. Additionally, the restaurant will operate a secondary operation called G Latin Cafe, offering special menu items and different hours of operation, which will require a 3rd identification sign. Applicant would also like to take advantage of the multiple awnings on its building to advertise the various food choices and services it offers. Given its corner location, its ground elevation below the Ogden Avenue elevation, and its wide variety of food and service options, applicant would not have the necessary exposure without this additional signage and could not yield a reasonable return on its investment.
If you agree with this, please raise your hand. Unanimous in agreement?
Criteria number 2, the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. Applicant's restaurant is in a unique location in that it has a corner location set at a lower grade than the adjacent street, and additional signage is warranted to provide maximum exposure. The proposed signage is tasteful and consistent with a higher-end restaurant.
If you agree with these findings, please raise your hand. We are unanimous in agreement.
The variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. The restaurant is located along the heavily commercial Ogden Avenue corridor and located within the St. James Crossing Strip Mall. The proposed signage is consistent with the existing signage for the numerous other businesses in the location and will not alter the essential character of this area.
If you agree with this, please raise your hand. We are unanimous in agreement. The findings of fact for a variance request to increase the allowable number of signs from 2 to 3 is hereby adopted. Under Planning and Zoning Item 09023, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval to the Board of Trustees. Item A, zoning code variance request to increase the number of allowable signs from 2 to 3 plus awning lettering.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Anton, seconded by Commissioner Fidesco. Question on the motion? May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fleet?
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Pill?
Yes.
Commissioner Anton?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Richard.
Yes. Okay, item B is also a zoning code variance request. May we have a reading of the findings of fact?
Criteria number 1, the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in the district in which it is located. The property is uniquely situated on the corner of Pasquinelli Drive and Ogden Avenue, requiring additional signs for each street frontage and thus additional square footage for signs. Additionally, the restaurant will operate a secondary operation called G Latin Cafe, offering separate menu items and different hours of operation, and which will require a 3rd identification sign. Applicant would also like to take advantage of the multiple awnings on its building to advertise the various food choices and services it offers. Given its corner location, its ground elevation below the Ogden Avenue elevation, and its wide variety of food and service options, applicant would not have the necessary exposure without this additional sign square footage and could not yield a reasonable return on its investment.
If you agree with this, please raise your hand. We are unanimous in agreement.
Criteria number 2, the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. Applicant's restaurant is in a unique location in that it has a corner location set at a lower grade than the adjacent street, and additional sign square footage is warranted to provide maximum exposure. The proposed signage is tasteful and consistent with a higher-end restaurant.
If you agree with these findings, please raise your hand. Unanimous in agreement.
Criteria number 3, the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. The restaurant is located along the heavily commercial Ogden Avenue corridor and located within the St. James Crossing Strip Mall. The proposed signage is consistent with existing signage for the numerous other businesses in this location and will not alter the essential character of this area.
If you agree with these findings, please raise your hand. We are unanimous in agreement. The findings of fact for a zoning code variance request to increase the maximum gross square footage of signage to approximately 233 square feet are hereby adopted. I would recommend approval to the Board of Trustees. Item B, a zoning code variance request to increase the maximum gross square footage of signage to approximately 233 square feet.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Fidesco, seconded by Commissioner Pill. Question on the motion? May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fidesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Pill?
Yes.
Commissioner Anton?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Fleet?
Yes.
And Chairman Richard?
Yes. All right, sir, you have our recommendation, and staff can tell you when you'll be scheduled for a meeting before the Board of Trustees. And good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Wish you the best.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, under old business, planning and zoning, item 06038, Village of Westmont regarding a Westmont zoning code text amendment as follows. A, amend Westmont zoning code to add language creating a cash in lieu parking fund in the B1 Limited Business District, which requires petitioners to pay a specific amount for each on-site parking space waived by variance. Shannon?
Okay, thank you. The commission will remember that this has been before you twice before, going back a couple of years. The first time was August of 2006. The request before you this evening is to basically, for any parking space waived by variance, a fee would be assessed and then placed into a special fund in order to help mitigate some of the problems that may occur in the future with not having adequate parking if that were to become the situation. Things like acquiring property, providing the spaces. What has happened over the last year and a half or so, I think we're going back now, is Rich and Associates was hired after an RFP was put out for a parking consultant to do a parking study in downtown Westmont. That study came back in November of last year. The second time that the commission met on this matter was December of 2007. And at that time, the commission wanted to wait for further information from the parking consultant before making a final recommendation. The findings of the Rich and Associates study, there's a summary in your packet this evening, but one of the key recommendations was to improve management of existing parking facilities because a true shortage wasn't found. In fact, there is ample parking in downtown Westmont, but there are pockets where there's trouble in especially that first block north of the tracks with acquiring a parking space. And some of the suggestions that were made were to try to implement systems that would help manage that, one of which has been discussed at the village board considerably. That is trying to reserve on-street parking spaces for employees or that formerly were used by employees, that those spaces should try to be used by customers of businesses. So the board has recently approved a couple of ordinances that are somewhat related to this. The first is a new employee parking permit program. And then the second is a parking fund. So the fees from that fund, the fees from any tickets issued in downtown Westmont, the fees for any variances for parking waivers, essentially, if this ordinance were to be approved, would all be placed in this fund with the long-term goal of being able to provide additional parking facilities for the central business district. Just kind of generally, I think we talked probably back at the first meeting, there were some questions about how much does it cost to provide parking. Staff came back in December of '07 with some figures. Generally, on-street or off-street parking in a surface lot costs approximately $10,000 per space. Non-surface parking, garage or structured parking costs approximately $15,000 per space. Those were the numbers a few years ago. Since that time, we've even heard as high as $16,000 per space to provide structured parking. The village did an exercise where we were looking at the possibility of acquiring at one time the lot just south of Village Hall here, and we did a rough sketch and determined that to provide surface parking adjacent here to Village Hall would cost approximately $12,000 per space. So you're looking between $10,000 to $12,000 for the surface and somewhere around $15,000 to $16,000 for structured. Staff spoke to several other communities and came back with some figures. Some of those figures are quite high. Communities charge anywhere from $10,000 for a parking waiver in Clarendon Hills. Elmhurst is $10,000 in their central business district. Hinsdale has a $2,500 waiver, and they also waive up to 7 spaces, I believe. So a couple of years ago, the last time that this was discussed here, the recommendation was for a $500 to $1,000 fee per stall waived by variance in the central business district. Because of the economic conditions at this time, because we don't want to have the perception that it would be difficult for a mom and pop type business to get started in town, there's a question of whether that should be lowered to something more like $250 or $500, somewhere in that neighborhood. And we've also prepared a couple of discussion points to just kind of lead the conversation, because there are a couple of factors that we'd like your opinion on this evening. So I can go into those, or if you want to have any general questions first.
Okay, why don't we start with Commissioner Thomas, and any thoughts, questions on this, if you may?
$10,000 per space. I don't know what, but then again, how do you get any money into the fund if you don't charge? But 10,000 would be prohibitive, I would think, and should be a lot lower, down to the $250 to $500 range, I would think, for space. And as discussion points here, should that 250 or 500 be per space, or for whatever spaces they're getting a variance for? I would think that 250 to 500 would be more in line with, especially getting a business started. That's all I have.
All right, Commissioner Phil?
Yes. I'm not sure who this question would be for, perhaps John or Fred or Shannon. But let's take an example of an unoccupied structure. So we have perhaps the one over near Taco Grill, excuse me. So if a new person came in there and we had set something up, and they had 10 spaces that they were found to be deficient in, and they paid for those 10 spaces, and 3 years later they either relocated their business or their business went out and it was unoccupied for another year, and then in the 5th year a new tenant comes in, how would we view that new tenant then? Would that new tenant be expected to, and let's say that tenant has a different business and they're deficient by only 8 spots, or 12, 2 more than the 10. How would that tenant be viewed? Or is that something we're also trying to decide? Because I had trouble with that concept.
Well, very good question, Commissioner, and that's one of the things that we discussed at the staff level and with the village legal counsel. That would be a new situation, a new variance would be required. That's why we're recommending a very low amount per space rather than something in the thousands of dollar range. We don't want to discourage mom and pop businesses from doing that, but by setting it at, say, $250 or $500, it's going to take an awfully long time to build a fund up to where we can acquire additional property or resurface the lot at 33 North Lincoln to provide additional parking for the downtown. We factored in to that recommendation, the $250 or $500, the fact that over a long period of time, that same property could roll a number of times as businesses come and businesses go, but each business, we think, that comes in there and requests a parking variance waiver should pay into that fund to contribute to the future supply of parking in the downtown for the long term.
I agree and support that concept also, and I think the time has come, and I think there's reasonableness that can be used in this. I would look at perhaps a tiered set where the first 3 spots would be staff approved and would be at a combined rate of $500. Spots numbered 4 through 15 would be at $250 per spot, and from 16 and up would be at $500 per spot. This sort of creates, depending on the need, a tiering structure, and if businesses change and things like that, that number may also change, and it allows the smallest ones to be done at the staff level, which will probably take care of the majority of them, and allow those people to not have the additional expense of coming before planning and zoning and the village board. So it sort of redirects some of the funds, energy, and time into the parking fund, which is what we're really here to try to establish. I think as long as the businesses do roll over, and as that occurs, they would go back to this, and I think that would keep me supporting the smaller numbers, also the economic conditions, but those will change also with time. But as long as we're allowing the businesses to roll over, and we don't grant provisions into any type of ordinance that freezes it after one time, because then the fund, of course, is never going to grow. You have a finite amount. I think we would be in good shape. Those are my opinions at this point.
Maybe, Mr. Pill, if I could amplify a little bit too, I think what the village board and staff envision with setting up this fund, not only would parking variance fees go into this fund, but also the proceeds from the sale of downtown employee permits would go into this fund. Any parking fines that were assessed in the downtown B1 district would go into this fund. There could be other sources of revenue that could be chosen to add to this dedicated parking fund downtown. I can think of federal or state government grants that might further the TOD strategy.
Stimulus money, perhaps.
Stimulus money could go in there to provide, and such other appropriations as the village board may see from time to time coming from the general fund could be placed into this fund to fund specific parking expansion projects. So this would be a repository of 5 or 6 different conceivable sources of revenue, all of which could go together to build something of a meaningful nature.
I have to say, as both as a president and as a village business owner, I appreciate the time and the great expense that the village board went to hear everybody's opinions. I followed that very closely on TV, and I appreciate Attorney Zemanek's very clear description of what would go into the fund in establishing that ordinance. And I think it was really well done and a good idea. And in most cases, you're never going to make everyone happy. That's very seldom the case. But in this particular case, I think there was support from people in the business community as well as people who were against the whole concept. But I think this will make for a better downtown area. And we have certainly spent now, I believe, Shannon, you said August of 2006 we started on this. So we have now spent in excess of 3 years. There's been a parking study. There's been input from the Downtown Westmont Business Association, the Westmont Chamber, as well as individual businesses and individual citizens. So a lot of people have had a chance now to speak on this, and it's time to wrap this project up. We received a lot in our packet to read tonight. A lot of it is a rehash of things we talked about, and I don't know that it's necessary. I certainly don't feel necessary to bring all those points up again because there is a good written record of them. But I think a tiered approach and some leeway for staff to go ahead and take care of the smaller cases would benefit the business community in the long run.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of elaborate, if staff may on that, Mr. Pill alleged, indicated that we've been talking about this for 3 years. I've been in the community for about 6 years now. This has been a hot topic, and in talking today earlier to the mayor and some of the folks that were affiliated with our former Main Street program in Westmont, I understand that these discussions go all the way back to the mid-1960s in the village of Westmont. I know Commissioner Richard and Commissioner Van Buren have been associated with the Planning and Zoning Commission for a number of years and can perhaps validate that. But, the thinking is, we've been debating this for almost 40 or 50 years now. Isn't it time that we try something? And let's give it the old college try. And as the village board said, let's try it for 6 months and revisit it. It's something that we can tweak if it's not working right. But let's at least make an attempt to solve some of our long-term parking issues downtown through actions such as these.
Well, certainly if this item is created, it can be abolished if we find it's not working. So, but your words are taken well. Commissioner Anton.
I agree with Commissioner Pill. I like his tiered approach. That way the mom and pop organizations have a chance to start off. I also live in the town, been here, I think 16 years, built a new house here, business owner in the town. I like that approach. Give everybody a chance, give the businesses a chance. You got to. You got to make sure, we don't ever want to have that moniker that it's too expensive to come here to have a business. We don't want that. You want to work with the businesses and make that happen. I think that's the way to do it. And then what Shannon said about the dollar value is correct. I just was awarded, I was lucky enough in this time frame, the way the economy is, I got awarded the 240 space parking garage in Naperville. I'll be doing that shortly here. And it's about $2.8 million just for the parking garage, not the property. So that's my end of it is $2.8 million. So whatever that comes out space-wise, it's got to be up there. I never even looked at the spaces, what it costs, and that's just a one-floor parking garage, so it is expensive. It's all precast and it's all concrete, so it is very costly. And I like if some of the business goes under or goes away or moves, roll it over, the same thing, fees apply again. But if we keep it low and then graduate it up, I think that's a great idea. And I agree with what Fred said. It's time to get moving on it. Let's do something, make it happen. There's a lot of great ideas out there. Let's put them together and do it. That's all I have.
Commissioner Van Buren.
Yeah, I agree too that it's time that we do something about it, but I try to do a little extension here. If a parking spot costs $10,000, and if we turned that spot over every year, it would, 4 years, we'd get to 1,000. 40 years at $250. If it turned over every year, we could buy one parking spot, 40 years. So while I agree we should get started, is this really realistic, even considering that fines and other things would go into it?
Well, I think if this fund is also a repository for other government grants, which could be much more significant, at least we've got kind of a trickle stream of revenue coming into there, which could be added to through grant acquisition or other general fund appropriations that the village board might from time to time declare as necessary.
I'd like to add a point to what Fred just said too. We're finding some frustration at the staff level with grant opportunities because the village is always, or for the most part always, required to provide a matching amount. So this would provide us with an opportunity or a funding source to match when we have a chance to apply for significant grant monies, that we would have a matching source to be able to come up with that revenue.
I think the other way to look at it too is that until a week ago, there was nothing going into the fund. And now we have parking permits. And now we have a chance for in lieu of. And now we're going to see parking fines go into it. So the list is broadening. And certainly when the first item was passed in there, it would have been easy to say, well, this is going to take 100 years before we can do anything. But as soon as you put 2 things in there, it cuts it down to 80, and 3 things cuts it down to 60. And what we have to hope is that through good economic times, the possibility of some type of government funding and matching things, And also, if we see that revenues go back up, there may be monies put aside specifically into this. If the 63rd Street businesses come to fruition, and at some point the economy will rebound, there's a possibility of another car dealer coming to Ogden Avenue. Those kinds of things could increase revenue to the point where perhaps some of these things might be even more doable in a shorter period of time.
Well, I would just add that, considering that we should get started, I agree with your team.
I did the math too, and you're right. It is bleak, but it's certainly gotten brighter as you begin to look and add more components.
I'll do the garage for no fee and no overhead, too.
Talk to legal counsel about that.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Well, I want to basically agree with Commissioner Pill on the 3 and below should definitely be handled by staff. And then as far as the tiered approach, I like that, but 15 might be a little high before you kick back into the 500. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 12, but not 15. I'm just saying that, from what I remember being on the board, the village board, that we didn't have that many that required large number of spaces. They were typically, 2 to 5, less than 10, and that's my memory. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but so we would allow the mom and pop businesses for the variances that they require, and anybody who's putting in, say, a restaurant, they're the ones that are going to require that 15 or, dozen or more space variance. And they're the ones that could probably afford more to pay. And that's where I'm a little different there, but that's something to look at.
I'm certainly agreeable to it. I picked that number not totally at random. I had looked back on the 5 years I served on the commission, and there was almost never anyone between 10 and 15.
Okay.
So I figured let's
my
just let
memory's
it go right
correct.
to 15 as opposed to moving it down to 10. New businesses coming in, which are going to knock something down and put up a bigger structure. For instance, perhaps a national chain or something, if that were to happen, are going to be far in excess of 15 spots. So they're going to kick into the higher one anyway. So that was my rationale behind picking that.
And that, my memory said, 10 and below, and if there was no request in there between 10 and 15, maybe it should be 15, because there really won't be that many that'll fall there. So,
You've been here 5 years?
that's pretty much my comments, and I agree we need to do something soon. And yes, it will take many years, but some action's better than no action.
Commissioner Fleet?
Well, I agree with everyone mentioned before that we need to start. I really like the tiered idea. I think it gives, it answers a lot of problems about people in the middle with more than 3. I think there should be a number that the staff can handle without having to bring it up to us. And so conceptually, I think I agree with it all.
What kind of a dollar amount would you pay? You like the 2 to 5?
I like, yeah, I like that.
All right, Commissioner Pill's idea about structuring it that way, I like it very much. I was just wondering if maybe if you have like 1 to 5 at around 200, 6 on up, maybe 500. And one question I would have, number of employees. If we were to have a restaurant that started breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're not going to have the same employees working at the same time. Now, do we charge them on the amount of employees on duty at one time, or total number of employees employed?
On duty at one time, it's a calculation based on the expected number of employees working a standard shift, I believe, not total employees throughout a day on all their multiple shifts.
Yeah, I think there are 2
Right.
optional ways that you can calculate for a restaurant. One is by the number of tables, the number of 4 seats at a table, and then, it's
The other square
pretty
footage
complex.
based, and it's the highest, or the maximum number of anticipated employees at any time.
So that way, if they were to hire more people, we've still got our baseline that we're figuring on numbers of tables
Right.
and that's it.
In that
Okay.
formula.
Well, then I think I'd like to hear from each and everybody what what they thought as to structuring, 1 to 5, 1 to 6, and then 6 on up. And let's get a dollar amount so we can.
May I interject before we get to that point in the conversation? I just have
Absolutely.
a kind of clerical issue. Right now, whenever there is a need for 3 spaces or less, staff already waives that administratively. It doesn't need to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. It doesn't come to Village Board. One of the discussion points here was, do we initiate charging for those now, or do we have the threshold start at 3 and beyond? So I wanted to present that for discussion.
I think that's one of his questions that Chairman Richards has just asked, and I addressed it by saying that 3 and under would pay a flat fee of $500 for the right to have those spots.
Okay.
Up to 3, and it would be approved by staff. That was my concept. 4 through 15 was $250, and 16 and above was $500 per spot.
Okay.
Any further comments, numbers, dollar amounts?
I mean, is 250 the number, or do we make it 300, 200? I don't know what.
Whatever number you pick to start with, and of course it's subject to board review, but it can be reviewed over time and looked at. Certainly anyone who's coming in with, to use an example, they need a variance for 10 spaces or more. It's a pretty large scale development, either a very large residential development or a very large commercial development of some sort. And they're probably gonna have some deeper pockets than your ma and pa small development that has 3 spaces or less and is only has to pay $500. So I think there's some good rationale to your suggestion of having a tiered approach. I think the question in my own mind would be, should you even go higher as the number of variances or number of spaces increases?
If I understand correctly, you're saying 5 for the first 3? And that's discretionary, I mean, that can be, doesn't have to come before. Okay, would you question that 5?
The $500?
Yeah.
No.
For those 3, okay.
No, I think you don't want to put any sort of impediment on the real small mom and pop businesses who, I think 9 times out of 10 only have 3 spaces or less. Your need for that. I guess my only thought was, should you go for a higher number as the more than 250, or in particular the.
We've had so little experience with bigger projects like that coming into the downtown. I mean, I don't think we've had one.
To be honest with you, I don't know if I could really even conceive of a large business coming in, whether it be a restaurant or a
Hotel.
Richmond
Hotel or
Station
what?
came in.
Yes.
And that was a very large development, mixed use, and had a significant parking variance, particularly for the business use. They did pretty good on the residential, but they were still short on the residential. Then you had was it 216 North Cass?
210?
210.
210 North Cass, and they also required a variance, I forget for how many spaces.
8 or 9 spaces, I believe, yeah.
then I stand corrected, you're right.
And Mr. Chairman, the space that we have available in 9 and 11 West Quincy, though it hasn't been developed, it's got a nice stone facade on it with the gutted interior. If that were to go to, say, one large restaurant with either offices or condos above, that could be a fairly large-scale development, because I think we've got, 4,500, 5,000 square feet there.
The village has at least had preliminary talks that, given the economy, have fallen through, but there were some discussions for some larger scale developments in a few targeted areas that haven't happened, but and those would have required significant parking variances. And, a relatively deep pocket developer coming in. So my only thought is, you might not want to sell yourself too short, but on the other hand, this is a start, and a start's better than nothing.
Well, based on my historical recollection and John's insights, I would have no problem reconsidering my original concept to be up to 3, staff approval at a flat fee of $500, 4 to 10 at $250, 11 to 20 at $500, and 21 and above at $750 a spot.
Okay.
That might then better take care of the larger complexes coming in. We didn't have a lot in the 11 to 15 range anyway, so that still keeps that number, but it elevates it at the end, where you would have a bigger project, more inconvenience for other businesses in the area, as well as for the residents of the village and things like that, because it would be a bigger project and things like that.
Would anybody have a problem if I took that as a motion?
Not at all.
Second.
Let's go with a motion by Commissioner Pill, seconded by Commissioner Anton. Any questions on the motion? May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Pill?
Yes.
Commissioner Anton?
Yes.
Commissioner Fleet?
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Richard?
Yes. All right. Our recommendation to accept the text amendment is hereby approved. Any further comments? Anybody have any business? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, seconded by Commissioner Anton. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.